He took our kids to his mistress's favorite spots for years and had zero remorse about it. She kept showing up. The playground. The bookshop. The hair salon. Every single place this woman went to give her kids a normal life after her marriage fell apart, there she was. Just sitting there. Staring. And nobody could do anything about it because it was all completely legal. The situation felt so wrong that she started questioning her own mind, wondering if she was imagining things, wondering if grief was making her paranoid. She was not paranoid. What was actually happening was so much worse. Let us rewind this whole thing from the beginning, because the betrayal here did not start with the stalking. It started years earlier, and it is layered in a way that genuinely takes your breath away when you see the full picture. These kinds of stories have a habit of looking like one thing on the surface and then revealing themselves to be something far more elaborate once you start pulling the threads. This is one of those stories. Every time you think you have reached the bottom of it, there is another level underneath. This woman had been with her husband for years. She found out about an affair 5 years before any of this happened. She gave him another chance. She chose to believe him when he said it was over. She stayed. She built more of a life with him. Think about what that actually requires of a person. You have to look at someone who broke you and decide, consciously, to hand them the pieces again. You have to do the work of grieving what you thought the relationship was and then rebuild your understanding of it from the ground up. That is not a passive thing. That is a daily, deliberate act of choosing someone. They even had another child together during that reconciliation period, a little boy who is now 4 years old. She handed this man her trust a second time, which is one of the hardest things a person can do, and he used that trust to keep a whole second life running while she was busy raising their children and believing in the marriage they were rebuilding. The affair never stopped. Not for a single day of that reconciliation. He just got better at hiding it. The anonymous messages started coming in from accounts with no followers, sliding into her inbox on Facebook and Instagram, telling her exactly what was happening. Imagine sitting down with your phone expecting nothing and seeing a notification from a stranger who knows the specific details of your husband's secret trips. Details about places he had told her he was traveling for work. Dates he had given her entirely different explanations for. Their shared social life, the dinners and gatherings and ordinary weekend moments that belonged to a version of his life she had never been shown. The fact that his entire family knew about this woman and had been keeping the secret for years. His mother knew. His siblings knew. His friends knew. Everyone in this man's life had watched this woman raising children and running a household and believing in a marriage, and not one of them said a word. They sat across from her at family dinners and smiled and passed the bread, knowing everything. She asked him directly. Multiple times. Each time he denied it. He looked her in the eye and lied to her face, because at this point lying had become so automatic for him that it probably did not even register as a moral failure anymore. It was just maintenance. Just keeping the machine running. And then came the day she found earrings and a hair scrunchie in her own car. Her car. The one he had borrowed for a day. Small objects sitting in the center console like they had every right to be there. The earrings were not hers. The scrunchie was not hers. And in that moment the abstract, deniable suspicion became something solid and undeniable. He could not even keep the other woman out of the space his wife drove every single day. That was the moment something cracked. She went through his phone and found everything. Not just evidence of an ongoing affair, but evidence of a man who was completely emotionally invested in someone else. There were videos. There were messages where he told this other woman that the intimacy was better with her. That he loved her. That he wanted to be with her. She sat there reading words her husband had written to another woman, words she had probably hoped he felt about her, and she had to absorb them alone in whatever quiet corner of the house she had found to look. And then came the detail that landed like a freight train. They had a child together. A child that existed during the same period he was telling his wife the affair was over and they were rebuilding their marriage. He had started a second family while living inside the first one. Oh. My. Goodness. A whole child. He had a child with her. While reconciling with his wife. This man had the audacity to look his wife in the eyes during that reconciliation and act like a reformed man while actively fathering a child with someone else. That is not a mistake. That is a calculated, sustained, years-long deception. She left. She went to her mother's house and took her children with her. The separation became official. Picture what that departure actually looks like. You are packing bags in a house that was supposed to be your life, explaining to your children in whatever age-appropriate language you can find that things are going to be different for a while. Your 4-year-old does not fully understand. Your older children probably understand more than you wish they did. And you are carrying all of that while simultaneously processing a level of betrayal that most people only read about. She did it anyway, because staying was no longer possible and her children needed to see her choose herself. And then the showing up started. The other woman began appearing at the playground where she took the kids on weekends. The bookshop where she bought school supplies. The salon where she took her daughters to get their hair done. The ice cream shop. Every place she tried to create some normalcy for her children in the middle of a devastating life upheaval, this woman was there. Sitting quietly. Watching. Not making eye contact. Not approaching. Not saying a single word. Just occupying the same space with the kind of stillness that communicates everything without requiring any action at all. Just being present in a way that was deeply unsettling. She started questioning her own perception of reality, which is its own kind of cruelty. When someone makes you feel like you might be imagining something threatening, it strips away your ability to trust your own instincts. She knew what this woman looked like from the pictures and videos she had found on her husband's phone. She was not confused about the identity. But the consistency of the appearances was so relentless, so geographically specific, that she began wondering if grief was distorting her sense of coincidence. She began running through alternative explanations in her own head, trying to give herself reasons to dismiss it, because the alternative, that this was intentional, was almost too destabilizing to sit with. And that is a very lonely place to live. Holding something that feels real and threatening while simultaneously gaslighting yourself out of trusting your own eyes. She reached out online to ask for advice. She was not even angry in the way you would expect. She was careful, measured, trying to figure out the practical steps available to her. There was something quietly heartbreaking about the tone of that post, the way she was working so hard to be fair and rational in the middle of something that was completely irrational in its cruelty. She was still trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Still trying not to be the person who overreacts. She acknowledged that public spaces are public. She acknowledged that a woman sitting with her child at a playground is not committing a crime. She did not want to make a scene or escalate anything in front of her kids, who were already navigating their parents separating and did not need any more disruption. She just wanted to understand what her options were and whether she was losing her mind. And then she confronted her husband about it. His response was so casually cruel that it deserves to be read slowly. He told her that the other woman was not following her. He told her that she was the one going to places the other woman frequented. He then proceeded to explain, without any apparent sense of shame or remorse, that every single one of those locations had been introduced into the family routine by his mistress. The bookshop was where she shopped. The playground was where she used to take her nieces and nephews. The salon was a recommendation she made because her daughters and his wife's daughters had the same hair texture. The ice cream shop was her favorite. Every fun outing this man had taken his children on for years had been curated by his girlfriend. Let that sink in for a moment. He had been running his family's leisure life through the taste and preferences of the woman he was secretly with. His children had built memories and attachments to these places. They had favorites. They probably asked to go back. And none of it had anything to do with what their mother would have chosen. It was another layer of the other woman woven into their lives without the wife ever knowing it was happening. The places that felt like home to her children were someone else's map entirely. And he told her all of this without remorse. That detail matters enormously. He did not stumble over the explanation. He did not lower his voice or choose his words carefully. He did not sit with any visible discomfort before delivering information that would completely reframe years of her family's life. He laid it out and reminded her that it was a public space and that the other woman had not committed any crime. He framed it as a factual matter, a question of logistics and legality, as if his wife's distress was simply an error in her understanding of the situation rather than a completely reasonable response to years of systematic deception. He handed her this information and waited for her to update her perspective accordingly, as if the only problem here was her math and not his character. This woman is now left trying to find new alternatives for her children, knowing that the places they love were never really theirs. She has to uproot routines her kids are attached to because those routines were built on a lie. She has to explain to a child why they are not going to their favorite ice cream shop anymore without being able to explain the real reason. She has to watch her children feel the loss of something without understanding what they lost, and she has to hold that grief quietly because it is not her children's job to carry it. Finding a salon that properly caters to her daughter's hair texture is not a small thing. That takes time and trial and error and trust, and she has to start from zero because her husband handed that part of their lives to someone else without telling her. She is essentially rebuilding the entire physical landscape of her family's daily life from scratch, which is exhausting under any circumstances, let alone these ones. The original post had her questioning whether she was being stalked. The update revealed something in some ways more disturbing. She was not being stalked. She was living inside a life that had been quietly colonized. The geography of her family's happiness had been mapped by another woman, and her husband saw nothing wrong with pointing that out and walking away. He delivered that information the way you would explain a bus schedule. Clinical. Unbothered. As if the problem was her failure to understand the logistics rather than the years of active, layered deception that had brought them to this moment. The cruelty was not in the shouting. It was in the total absence of it. Now let us be very direct about what this man is. He is not someone who made a mistake and got caught. He is not someone who had a moment of weakness and then felt genuine guilt. He is someone who ran two complete family units simultaneously for years, lied to his wife's face about it repeatedly, fathered a child during a supposed reconciliation, let his entire social circle watch it happen in silence, and then, when the whole architecture of that deception was finally visible, responded with legal technicalities instead of remorse. He did not apologize. He did not show grief about what he had done. He gave her a geography lesson. That is not a person who stumbled. That is a person who made thousands of consecutive decisions to deceive. The woman in this story handled herself with far more dignity than most people could manage. She left. She asked for advice carefully and thoughtfully. She confronted the situation when she had enough information. She is focusing on her children. She did not spiral into public confrontations or unhinged behavior. Think about how easy it would have been to do exactly that. To walk up to this woman at the playground and let years of grief and rage come out in front of everyone, including her own kids. She did not do that. She kept herself contained, not because she was not hurting, but because her children were standing right there and they needed her to be steady. She just kept moving forward, even when every step forward uncovered another layer of how thoroughly she had been lied to. Here is the hard truth that closes this story out. The right outcome already happened. She left. The marriage was not reparable the first time, and it certainly is not reparable now. What matters most going forward is that she stops measuring her life against what he built with someone else and starts building something entirely her own. New routines. New places. New memories that belong only to her family as she is now building it. The geography of her children's happiness can be rewritten, and this time she gets to be the one who chooses every single location. He reminded her that the other woman has not committed any crime. He is right. But neither has she. And she is the one walking away with her integrity completely intact, which is more than can be said for anyone else in this story. I asked my girlfriend of 6 years for $100 and she made me feel like a stranger. 10:29 p.m. He had $30 in his bank account, a medical exam to pay for, and accommodation costs that turned out to be more than he planned. He was days away from his first paycheck from a new job he had worked over a year to land. So he called his girlfriend of 6 years and asked if he could borrow $100 for 48 hours. What she said next changed how he saw everything. She did not say yes. She did not even say no right away. She hesitated, started asking questions, and then landed on one specific question that cut straight through the practicality of the whole conversation. She asked him, "What would you do if I were not here?" That question, delivered in that moment, to that person, after 6 years together, did something that $100 never could have done. It drew a very clear line between what he thought the relationship was and what it apparently actually was. He told her to forget it. Not out of pride, exactly, but out of a sudden clarity that felt like cold water. He called a friend instead. The friend said yes without hesitation. The money was there within the hour. The practical problem was solved in minutes. But the question she had asked him stayed in his head, and it is still there, and that is what he is actually writing about. Let us place this in proper context, because context matters here. This is a 29-year-old man who just finished a master's degree. He spent over a year unable to find work in his field, which is engineering, in Germany, during what has genuinely been a difficult period for that sector. During that year he did not sit idle. He worked minimum wage jobs to cover his own costs, early mornings and long shifts, and the particular exhaustion that comes from doing work your education was never meant to prepare you for, while still sending out applications, attending interviews, trying to hold himself together professionally and personally. He did not lean on his girlfriend financially. He carried himself with a kind of quiet dignity that most people would not have managed. He was finally in a training program with a company, days away from a real paycheck, with a career trajectory that he and his girlfriend had both acknowledged would likely result in him earning significantly more than her and supporting them both going forward. This was not a man asking for a handout. This was a man asking his partner for a bridge loan of $100 for 2 days during the final stretch of a very hard year. He was standing at the finish line, out of breath, asking the person who was supposed to be cheering for him to hand him a cup of water. The thing that keeps nagging at him is not even the hesitation. People can hesitate. That is human. What got under his skin was the specific shape of the question she asked. What would you do if I were not here? That question is not about money. That question is about whether she sees herself as his partner or as an optional resource he should be grateful to have access to. It reframes a moment of mutual support as a test of his self-sufficiency. It puts her in the position of auditor rather than ally. And doing that to someone who has spent a year grinding through a brutal job market while keeping his head up and his hand out of her wallet is a particular kind of cold. Think about what it actually feels like to be on the receiving end of that question in that moment. You are in another city. You have $30. You have a bill you cannot avoid. You reach out to the one person in the world you have chosen above everyone else, the person you have plans to build a life with, and instead of feeling caught, you feel evaluated. That specific feeling of being assessed when you came looking for warmth is very hard to shake. He is being generous with her in how he frames it. He acknowledges that the past year created tension. He acknowledges that she may be feeling burned out from watching him struggle for so long even if she was not directly carrying his financial weight. He is trying to see her perspective with fairness, imagining what it must have been like on her side, worrying about a future that felt uncertain, perhaps quietly accumulating frustration while trying to stay supportive. He is doing the emotional labor of understanding her position even while sitting with his own hurt. That generosity is actually one of the most telling things about him in this whole story, because it shows someone who reflexively tries to extend understanding even when he is hurting. The question is whether that generosity is being extended towards someone who deserves it. Okay, but pause. She expects him to support both of them financially in the future. She has said this out loud. They have discussed it. She is comfortable with the idea of him eventually being the primary earner in their life together. But she hesitated over $100 for 2 days. I need someone to explain to me how those two things coexist in a person's mind, because I genuinely cannot make them fit. He is not asking whether what she did was technically wrong. He is asking what it means. And that is the more interesting and more painful question. One moment of hesitation does not necessarily define a person or a relationship. But one moment of hesitation in the right circumstances can reveal something that was already there, something that had been sitting beneath the surface of 6 years, something that only became visible because the stakes were low enough that she let her guard down. She was not fighting for her financial survival. She was not being asked for anything remotely significant. The low stakes of the request are exactly what made her reaction so loud. The fact that she asked that question without seeming to notice how it would land suggests she had not thought deeply about what he actually needed from her in that moment, and perhaps had not been thinking about it for some time. He mentioned that they had plans to move in together and eventually get married. Those are not small plans. Those are plans that require a foundational level of trust in each other's judgment and goodwill. Moving in together means your financial lives are going to become entangled whether you plan for it or not. Late rent, a broken appliance, a month where one income falls short and you cover it without keeping score. Getting married means making a legal and emotional commitment to function as a single unit when things get hard. And things will absolutely get hard. Engineering careers have cycles. Economies shift. Medical emergencies happen. Children are expensive. Life has a way of presenting moments where one person needs the other to simply say yes without making them justify the ask. If $100 for 2 days generates that question, what happens when the stakes are real? What happens when the number has 4 digits? What happens when the crisis does not come with a clear end date and a paycheck on the horizon? Here is what the verdict on this situation actually is. She was not wrong to have the feeling she had. Maybe she has been watching him struggle and feeling scared about the future. Those feelings are valid. But the way she expressed that feeling, in that moment, to someone standing in another city with $30 to his name and a medical exam to pay for, was unkind. It was the wrong moment for that question. A good partner does not choose the most vulnerable moment to test whether you can survive without them. A good partner fills the gap and has the harder conversation later, from a place of stability, where both people can actually hear each other. His instinct to question the relationship is not an overreaction. It is not wounded pride talking. It is a reasonable response to a moment that revealed a misalignment in how they each define partnership. He sees a team. He sees 2 people who back each other through difficulty because they believe the long game is worth it. Her question suggested she might see something more transactional than that, something where support is conditional on you first proving you could manage without it. He deserves someone who says yes without the audition. Whether that person is her or not is something only more honest conversation can determine. But he should go into that conversation with his eyes open and his expectations stated clearly, because he is about to turn a corner in his career and his life, and he should be doing that with someone who wanted to be there for all of it, including the part before the paycheck arrived. Drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder for you, because I honestly cannot decide. If you made it this far, a like and subscribe would mean a lot.